This is Waterfront Toronto's vision on the bottom for a large-scale transformation. Again, this is an end-state image that represents many decades of work. It's broken down into a series of projects that are ongoing, new neighborhoods that are being created. Waterfront Toronto is the creation of the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. And I was on a team that won a competition for the area at this end of the plan that you see here, 1,000 acres of portland, an incredibly strategic land reserve right in the heart of the city, which in the early part of the 20th century had filled the largest wetland on the Great Lakes, something that never would happen today, but totally different set of priorities at that point in time. So this was the site for the competition, and what Waterfront Toronto did was, instead of the way this might have been done a decade before, which would have been to have as separate but parallel projects the introduction of floodproofing, because there's a flooding issue where the Don River actually comes into the harbor. So you would have had floodproofing as one exercise, naturalization done by a different set of people as another exercise, development, which was a key objective here, being done by yet another group of people, the engineering infrastructure, the water, sewer, power, et cetera, being done by yet another group of people, and the transportation infrastructure done by its own group, and with some attempt to coordinate these. And instead, they said, let's throw this all together into one competition, all of these problem sets, and encourage the formation of teams. And we had at least a dozen different kinds of specialists on our team, including not just engineers and designers, but scientists. We were dealing with the very complex hydrology of the river and modeling the behavior of the river and dealing with the ecology and so on. And we will ask people to solve these problems synthetically, not analytically. Now that put an enormous burden on the teams. It was a very exciting competition, and what it resulted in was a solution that never could have emerged from each of these problems being dealt with individually. Would have been impossible. And it essentially involves moving the river out of its current course, creating a new estuary where the Don River comes into Toronto Harbor in the middle of a 100-acre park system. Again, that principle of doing multiple things and at the same time solving this major floodproofing problem. So this was, after a couple of months' work, was the competition entry that we submitted. Obviously, there's only so much information you can convey in a competition brief, and this was in 2005. We've been working ever since on the evolution of the plan. Sorry, I said 2005, 2007. And at this point, we're absorbing in much greater detail all the information to make this real. And I've simplified it here by just showing these 5 layers. In fact, there are more layers than that. It's keeping all these balls in the air, understanding all the issues related to public realm, circulation, built form, microclimate, neighborhoods, meaning development. In fact, we're going to be housing 25,000 people here and 10,000 employees on this site, and understanding all those interrelationships. And so this is just a few different ways of understanding the site. This is an image about the behavior of the river, the way in which it behaves both regionally as the end of a great watershed through the region going beyond municipal boundaries, and also locally in terms of its interaction with the surrounding urban fabric. This is as an ecologist would see it, with the ecotones that are produced along the river, the different kinds of natural environments, and the way of keeping these alive through a combination of harvesting stormwater from the urban areas, lake water, and the water which is coming down the river itself. This is the kind of environment that can be created in the heart of our city, and this whole theme of reconciliation of the urban and the natural worlds is one which is very, very strong in my world these days. This is seeing the same thing socially in terms of how this new set of neighborhoods would actually relate to an existing set of neighborhoods and all the uses and activities that are going on in these. Some of these are emerging neighborhoods, some of these are well-established existing neighborhoods, some of them are former industrial neighborhoods that are actually recycling, where the local economies are changing. Things like Filmport, which is a major set of new sound studios that's just been built, introducing a whole new set of relationships. So understanding what all these interactions are. This area, 325 acres, is large, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. This is this kind of mantra about 21st century neighborhoods, the ability to respond organically, to develop, to deal with a whole set of uses at transit supportive densities, to in fact replicate an understanding of how cities grew organically in the past. This is yet another aspect, microclimates. If we want the world to be such that people are walking and using transit in an exposed site like this, we have to be able to produce environments which are protected from the wind. The illustration there is from Malmö in Sweden, a similar northern climate where the buildings have been very effectively organized to provide that kind of wind protection. This is solar penetration, hours of sunlight on the public spaces, the river and the Keating Channel, which is the historic artifact from the engineered river, and being able to model in very sophisticated ways how the urban fabric can be contoured in order to privilege the penetration of sunlight. And in fact, some of this finds its way directly into zoning ordinances where we mandate performance related to hours of sunlight in particular streets and public spaces, and this gets tested as buildings come forward. It extends into the performance of buildings themselves, less energy consumption. So one of our consultants was TransSolar from Germany, who are specialists in some of the new sustainable technologies, and we got into issues of configuring the blocks in the plans so that the distance from window wall to core or window wall to corridors was such that we could get more natural light into buildings, both commercial and residential, and reduce the consumption of electricity. This going back to winds, there are many ways to solve these problems, and some of the things we do at a neighborhood scale, for example, looking at, as they did in Malmö, at the overall pattern and creating, in effect, a kind of built-form overcoat for the neighborhood that would protect it from the prevailing winter winds. These are some techniques in the landscape that would start to do the same thing, and ways of actually configuring the landscape so that through this use of topography we could create areas in the lee of these winds that would actually be protected at certain times of the year. And then translating this, beginning to translate this, this is with Michael van Valkenburg, noted landscape architect, who is my colleague here, into ways of shaping the landforms to achieve this. Harvesting the stormwater from the buildings for multiple purposes, both to feed the perched wetlands along the river, but also to provide irrigation for the trees in the neighborhood, the street trees. And out of all this comes the notion of a kind of neighborhood DNA, the conditions and properties that you want to have in every module of the development as it goes forward. Each phase would have a combination of certain amenities, certain services, access to transit, a portion of the public realm, all of those things which would be replicated over and over in different ways rather than waiting for an end state for these qualities to appear. This blending of targets, the ratio between people living and people working on the site, became extremely important, and to do that we really needed to understand the market conditions in the Toronto local economy, not just its site itself, and how this would impact and be impacted by that larger set of conditions.